What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. One thing I noticed come up for a number of folks who are interested in kind of pursuing that side hustle, side business, is that it entails a lot of work, maybe a bit more work than folks anticipated. And I think because this comes up so much, a lot of folks get into it, realize how much work is involved, and decide this is just absolutely not worth it for me. So in today's video, I'm going to offer some of my own reflections as far as what variables to consider to help you decide whether starting that side business is worth it for you. And I'm going to offer some tips to help make it a smoother process as well. Now, save for a few very rare exceptions, starting a side business tends to involve the most amount of work and the least amount of reward right at the beginning of the process. So if you didn't get your delayed gratification muscle exercised enough during graduate school, then starting a side business will do that for you. To put things in perspective, when I started Private Practice Skills in 2018, I was putting in a minimum of 20 hours of work per week during the nights and the weekends, and I didn't see a dime of income for that work for the first year. I mean, no matter what way you slice it, no matter what type of side business you're getting into, it takes time and strategy to make it happen. Similar to if you're starting to learn a new musical instrument or a new sport that you haven't really played before, if you want to kind of pursue it at your leisure, then it could sort of just become a fun hobby for you. But if you want to have serious success with it, then you're going to have to dedicate quite a bit of time and strategy to it. If you're hoping to generate a reliable source of side income, let's say a minimum of a few $100s per month, it is going to require some strategy, it is going to require some elbow grease, and you need to expect to set aside time on a regular basis in order to make it happen. The reason why I'm focusing so much on how much time and effort is involved in making that side business happen is because when we ask ourselves whether something that we did was worth it or not, we tend to measure whether the amount of effort we put into it was reasonable for the amount of outcome that we got. If you're thinking it's not going to require that much effort in order to get at the outcome you're hoping for in the side business, and then you get into it and it's just way more work than you thought it was going to be, there's a good chance you might feel it wasn't really worth it. So it's important to have a clear understanding of how much work is involved before you determine if it's worth it for you to lean into that side business. So in order to answer the question of whether it's worth it to you to start a side business, there are two questions you need to answer. The first question is, what's your end goal? And then the second question is, how much work is required to arrive at your end goal? The first question is actually quite important because depending on your end goal, the amount of work required could vary a ton. I mean, let's say your end goal was to self-publish a book and make 10 book sales per month. We might imagine the amount of work involved would be very different for that end goal as compared to, say, you want to get published with a major publishing company and, make it on the bestseller lists on Amazon and all that stuff. There's probably going to be a very different amount of work involved for that outcome. I think it's important to pause here for a moment and acknowledge that for a lot of folks when they're considering starting a side business, the end goal they have in mind might sound a little bit vague, like I'd like to make a little bit of extra money, or I'd like to earn an extra X dollars amount of money per month. It is really important though to have a much more specific end goal in mind. Otherwise, it's kind of loosey-goosey as far as, how much work is going to be involved to get there, and also it's not going to be really clear how to get there. As an example, when I started Private Practice Skills, my end goal was to teach therapists how to start and grow a private practice using free and affordable options to help folks get there. And I intended to generate income through YouTube ad revenue as well as through course sales. Now, it's 4+ years later, my business has taken many shifts over the years, but having that end goal in mind from the get-go allowed me to identify what steps I needed to take in order to eventually arrive there. Once you get clear on what your end goal is, now you can finally ask the question, what's required of you to arrive at your end goal? Now, depending on what kind of end goal you have in mind, the route to answering this question is going to look very different from person to person. But once you're clear on what your end goal is, you can go find the answers rather easily. I mean, you can ask Google. You can find other folks who either have already arrived at their end goal or they're kind of in the early stages of moving towards that end goal. You can join Facebook groups of other folks pursuing similar end goals. There are so many ways you can access the answer to this question of what's required of you to arrive at this end goal before you've invested hardly any of your time. Once you get very clear on this and all the details and what kind of timeline and how many hours per week, all of that is going to be required of you, then you can genuinely ask yourself, Does it feel worth it to me to put in all that time and energy to arrive at the end goal I have in mind? For those of us who are therapists, we've been through this thought process for sure at least once before when we said, I have an end goal. I would like to be a therapist one day. And if we knew nothing else, we might say, yeah, that sounds nice. Let's pursue it. But for some folks who say, oh, it'd be really nice to be a therapist, but let me look into what's required. Oh, I have to go to grad school for at least 2 years, sometimes 4, sometimes more. After grad school, I have to do these pre-licensure hours. Oh, and sometimes you don't even really get paid for those. And then you have these licensure exams and not everyone passes the first time. And so by the time everything's all said and done, I've given, myself full time for X number of years to this thing without getting paid, and I'm going to have this much school debt, and my family life is going to be on hold, and etc. So is that worth it to me? Hopefully you went through that process and you said yes. There are going to be some folks who go through that thought process and decide, nope, that's not worth it to me. In fact, I know those folks. It's a lot of work to become a therapist. But it's really helpful to take the same mindset before going into a side business. I think because it's a side business, we kind of see it as like this thing we can just kind of like not give too much thought or strategy to, and it could kind of like accidentally come together, but it doesn't usually work like that. Starting a new business, however big or small, is a huge venture, and it's important to know what you're getting into. Now, you may look into all those details just like you did for grad school and realize, yeah, that's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it to me. If that's what it takes and I'm gonna get to that end goal, I'm in. I'm gonna put my head down and make it happen. And so in conclusion, to answer the question of the title of this video, is building a side business worth it? I mean, the honest answer is it depends on so many things, as we've talked about. But the reason why I wanted to make this video is because I believe it's possible for you to be empowered to have the information you need to make an informed decision about whether it's worth it for you in your current situation in life to go ahead and pursue that side business. And before we close, I'd like to thank TherapyNotes.com for sponsoring this video. Therapy Notes helps with scheduling, notes, and billing. They have a HIPAA-secure telehealth platform and so much more to help you manage your practice. If you'd like to check out Therapy Notes, you can get 2 months to try it for free with no commitment just by clicking the link in the description of this video. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, whether you're thinking about starting a side business or maybe you've already started one and you're wondering if it's worth it to you. If you have, leave a comment below sharing whether you think it was worth it or maybe a tidbit to help people figure out if it's worth it for them. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.